It's the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast with your hosts, the Wolf and Action Jackson, who are keeping rock alive by talking classic rock, hard rock, progressive rock, heavy metal, 80s music, early MTV, UK vs. US chart success, and much more. This is the home of classic album and live concert reviews and your place for interviews with artists and legends. You're rocking with the Wolf. Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 208 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast. Brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf, and I will be joined, as I always am, by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the USA, Mr. Gary Action Jackson. And we hope you enjoyed last week's show with our special guest and friend of the show, Autumn Whitaker, talking about the very interesting night she spent at the We Are One concert for the inauguration of President Barack Obama, going backstage and meeting legends like Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, and Bono. Just a rare story that I didn't think you guys would hear everywhere. I know everyone was kind of sick of the election and glad it was over, but I thought maybe this would be a fun post-election story. Doesn't really matter who you voted for or voted against. This was a rare story of being in close contact with huge rock stars with a little bit of a political bent to it. So we threw it in there. We love Autumn, and we hope that you enjoyed those stories. This week, we actually dig something out of the archive a little bit. Sometimes we'll record shows and we'll keep them in the vault until we need them for one reason or another. And earlier in 2024, Netflix put out a documentary called The Greatest Night in Pop, which is really the story about creating the single We Are the World, which was done for charity to benefit starving folks in Africa. It was led by Quincy Jones, and the main songwriters were Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson. Of course, if you lived through that time, you know that what a big deal this was. You know, how big the single was, how they played it on every radio station around the world. They played the video a lot. It raised millions and millions of dollars for charity. And it had some incredible star power. We're talking Bruce Springsteen, Diana Ross, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Cyndi Lauper, Bob Dylan, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, Willie Nelson, Billy Joel. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And this documentary shows how they broke it all down, which, if you think about it, how did they get all those stars in one room at once? Well, Ken Kragen, manager of the Stars and manager of the great Lionel Richie, got on board with Smokey Robinson and said, yeah, we'll definitely do this. But how are we going to get everybody in one place at one time? Well, a lot of them were going to be in for the American Music Awards that January. So everybody who was going to the award show, they could do it afterwards. And anybody else like Bruce Springsteen, all right, well, they could come in for the event. Only problem was they decided to do it about 5 weeks before the American Music Awards. So they went from concept to recording in about 5 weeks. It's unbelievable. It was a fantastic story. It featured interviews from everybody who was involved for the most part, as long as they were still alive. And we just really enjoyed it. And the reason we decided to drop it now is because we did recently lose Quincy Jones. And this song is really just kind of a testament to his enormous talent. Being able to put this together in such a short period of time and then make it all happen from about 11 p.m. till about 6 a.m. the next morning was nothing short of magic. Nobody in the world but Quincy Jones could have done it. And so we thought it'd be a fun way to honor him to go ahead and release this episode now. But first, we have a little bit of business to take care of. As always, we like to mention we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a family of over 100 shows. And there's a way to invest in Pantheon Pods. You can learn more at pantheonpodcast.com or follow on socials at Pantheon Pods. And we have to give a shout out to our incredible sponsor, rarevinyl.com. It's the holidays, folks. And you need stuff for your friends and family, but you also need cool stuff for yourself. And I don't know about you, but the only way I can make sure that I get stuff that I want is to go out and buy it myself, then give it to the she-wolf and say, here you go. You can put your name on this from you to me or from the kids to me. And I encourage you to do the same thing. And if you go to rarevinyl.com and use the code UGLY, you can save 10% off one entire order. Not just one item, but one entire order. So if you need to get Taylor Swift album for the kids, do that. You need something old and rare for the odd uncle, get that. But then get something you want, whether it's a box set, whether it's a rare release, whether it's a picture disc, something from another country. Rare Vinyl's got over 250,000 items in stock, and they ship all around the world. So don't just buy one thing and save yourself a small 10%. Buy everything you need, the new stuff, the rarities, the CDs, the LPs, the singles, whatever it is, at Rare Vinyl. Use code UGLY to save 10%. Your record collection will thank you. Now back to the greatest night in pop. If you've ever listened to our show, you know I'm a sucker for a good documentary about music, a rock band, whatever. It doesn't even really matter who it is. I might not even like the band, but a good documentary is always fascinating to me. And this was a special time in the world where you gathered all this talent into one place to do something not just for themselves, but for those who needed help. Bob Geldof kind of pushing them all in the right direction. It really was a cool thing to do. And the way it all came together and the way they recorded it was nothing short of magical. And this documentary shows in great detail how it was all put together. It really was something. So here we go. We're giving you a review of the greatest night in pop documentary right here on The Wolf. So you know, Jackson, and any listeners of the show know that I am a sucker for a good music or rock band documentary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Doesn't even have to be a rock band that I like. Like, you know, they say, oh, there's a George Michael Wham documentary. Yes, I'm glued to my TV for an hour and a half or whatever it is. So not too long ago, I'm scrolling through Netflix and there's a square called The Greatest Night in Pop. And I think it had a picture of Michael Jackson on it. I'm like, okay, well, whatever that is, I got to at least see what it is. And it turns out it was about the creation of the We Are the World single for USA for Africa, which was a huge deal when we were growing up. The British guys did it first. Bob Geldof enlisted everyone for the Christmas time song.
Right.
All the big pop stars of the time. So you had everyone from like Duran Duran and Bananarama to Phil Collins and Bono and, you know, lots of amazing stars. And then later the USA for Africa thing came together. And I kind of just took it for granted, like, okay, that's what pop stars are doing right now at this time. It never dawned on me, especially then, but even now, it never really dawned on me, like, what did it take to pull that together? And then you start to think about, well, how did they get 40 some odd stars in one room at one time? How could they even do that? They would have had to book that 3 years out, right? So this was fascinating to me on a lot of levels.
Well, are you talking about, like, are you thinking about it now, or are you talking about thinking about it in 1985?
Well, thinking about it in 1985, I didn't think much of it. I'm a kid. I'm like, okay, yeah, they just got everybody in a room. They did it. Thinking about it now.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like, yeah, these guys all hang out together. They're probably, you know, they're hanging out anyway, so they would just do this thing.
They're in LA, so what? Yeah, they did it on a Thursday or whatever. It doesn't matter. Thinking about it now, I'm like, well, that's impossible.
Right.
To get all those schedules coordinated, that can't be done. I'm like, I'm just thinking through my head, I'm like, that's just not even possible. There's no way to do it. But then the way they did it, you start to realize, oh, okay, yeah, I see how they made it work around the American Music Awards. But when you consider it was like 5 weeks or something like that from the idea, from Harry Belafonte going to Ken Kragen and say, we need to do this, to actually recording it, that's impossible. That certainly couldn't be done today. Impossible.
Well, especially when Lionel Richie goes through the whole thing about how, you know, they had the idea came down. Okay, you're going to write the song. Okay, cool. You know, we've got, you know, we're working on it. He goes to Michael Jackson's house and they laying some stuff down, but he's busy. Everybody's busy. And then it's like, oh, yeah, we're doing this next week.
Right.
Wait, what?
Quincy's like, where's the song? What song?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've been working on that. No, I need it finished in like 3 days so we can get it out to everybody. Because yeah, they had to put the rough demo, because I mean, the people who were participating had no idea. They'd never heard it. They don't know what to sing.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, so let's go through this and set the stage as best we can, and then we can point out the stuff that we find fascinating. Yeah. So it's almost Christmas, 1984, Harry Belafonte, the legend. And they were quick to point out that, yes, Harry Belafonte is an actor and a songwriter and a performer and all that. But at this point, he's more of an institution, especially around social justice and fighting for the rights, really of everyone, but certainly for blacks in the United States of America. He's this gentleman who has put his career at risk to fight for his people. So he's no longer just another guy who sings and dances and acts. He's kind of like on another level than everybody else at this point.
And that's something I didn't know at all. I mean, I knew who Harry Belafonte was. I knew he was he was a singer. He had the Banana Boat song. That's great. But yeah, the level of commitment that he had and what he had done when they had pictures of him, marching, sitting next to Martin Luther King and being a pillar of that community. I didn't really know anything about that, so that was fascinating to start off with.
Yeah, and it endures. I mean, Spike Lee put him in his Black Klansman movie to speak, to the group of students was it Colorado or Colorado State, whatever it was, talking about the horrors of what's happened to black people over the years. That was Henry Belafonte in that. So this is a role he's taken on with grace for decades now. And so that's kind of who he was to the Lionel Richies and the Michael Jacksons and to the black community at the time.
And I can see too how he was a little bit bent out of shape or not bent out of shape, but maybe I can see how he was a little almost maybe embarrassed that the people in England had put this whole big thing together and the United States was way behind. What was the line? They got white folks helping black people. We need black folks helping black people.
Yeah.
And so this was very personal for him.
Yes, exactly. And that's why he went to Ken Kragen. Now, I can't say that I really knew who Ken Kragen was.
No.
He's the manager to superstars. He's the kind of guy who knew how to work the music business, how to work Hollywood, how to work the press, how to get the right people together, how to find the right places to do things. The only other time I'd ever seen him in anything was on the Late Shift movie. The story about how Johnny retired and Jay came in and Dave was jockeying for it and all that. And so Jay's manager, who I guess had become an executive producer of the Tonight Show, was played by Kathy Bates, who was apparently a very difficult person to deal with. And so she called up Ken in the movie, and Ken was playing himself. And I think it was that she had seen Garth Brooks stuff all over, like seen his billboards around, and they want him on the show. And then he's like, okay, yeah, that's great. But, there's kind of this gentleman's agreement with other shows or whatever. It's like, yeah, we're not going to have him in. Like, he's already doing one show, so we can't do yours for a while. She's like, screw that. You get him on here. I won't book any of your shit kicker, you whatever. He's like, look, I don't think you know me, but I don't really react well to this kind of stuff. And so then he goes like straight to the press who know him, who like him, who want to work with him, and talk about what a terrible person. That's the only time I ever saw him or kind of knew some idea of who he was, but he's kind of a legend in the business. So that's why Harry went to Ken to say, hey, let's get this done. And Ken got it right away. And he's like, yes. And he managed a lot of the biggest stars of the day, but he was going to go out and contact and try to get as many of the others as he could. He's like, all right, well, where do you start? Well, let's start with the biggest people in pop today. And that's one of his clients, Lionel Richie, who was huge at the time. His solo album,
Can't Slow Down,
have it on cassette. Everybody did. Must have gone diamond. Huge hit.
You might want to just stop right there. Let's try Double Diamond.
It's Can't Slow Down, Double Diamond.
Because I was looking at that because I didn't really realize. I knew who Lionel Richie was obviously, but I'm like, it's Lionel Richie. It was never really for me. Whatever. Can't Slow Down. Yeah, it has a big. Oh my! It's in excess of 20 million copies, and he was just everywhere then.
He was on fire. Yeah. And Ken Kragen had a lot to do with that. And there's a great line in the movie that Lionel said, Ken went to him and said, look, your songs are famous, but no one knows that they're yours.
Right.
No one knows who you are because he was in the Commodores, one of the Commodores. So he said, what we're going to do is we're going to blast your face next to every song, make you videos, make sure people know it's you, Lionel Richie, who is creating this music. And I guess it worked.
Yeah.
In a big way. So he gets Lionel. Okay, Lionel, you're going to do this? Yes, I'm in. Great. Who are you going to do it with? I was like, well, we got to get Quincy in because Quincy Jones was the master producer and he's coming off Thriller. And he's not only a producer, but he's an arranger and a composer and a conductor. And he can really get 50 people together and get something out of them. Talks to Quincy and Quincy's in. The fact that Quincy, it was just his voice in here was kind of a bummer.
Yes.
Right, because he's one of the key guys. I know that he's a legend and he's old and he might not have the same sharpness that he had, because he's like 90 now. So it would be tough to get him, but you can't get Michael Jackson in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's obviously a pretty important part of it. So it would have been good to have Quincy in. I know that they had him talking about it later in audio. That's good. But if there's any kind of like, should they have had anyone else in it? It would have been nice if Quincy was in it.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody else could have put that together. And that shows up later on when they get into the actual recording of it. And we'll get to that point.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But then Lionel's talking to Quincy and now has his 28 Grammy Awards, 29 if you include the Legend Award he got in 92. He's like, well, I'm going to talk to Michael later. Why don't I ask if he'll do it? Of course, Michael was in. And then they also apparently got Stevie Wonder in, but then Stevie couldn't be contacted. Stevie, I guess, is on his own time.
Yes, Stevie lives on Stevie time is what they were saying. And yeah, I'll call you back could be 3 months from now.
Yeah, but once you've got Lionel in, who's on fire and about to host the American Music Awards, which were kind of a big deal back then.
Yeah.
You've got Quincy Jones, you've got Michael Jackson, and then you've got Stevie Wonder. Okay, now you've got this star power. Now you can go out and start to call people and say, will you do this? And they'd be crazy to say no. So that's what Kragen got busy doing. Like, will you do this? And so they started saying, yeah. People start signing up left and right for it. So that's pretty big. But I guess they didn't get everybody they wanted. And that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah, there were some scheduling conflicts and there were some people that I guess just passed for whatever reason. But the people they didn't get, the list was a lot longer. The people they did get, and they ran through a couple people that didn't show up there, and I don't know how that would have worked. Like I know one of them, David Byrne from Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they did mention Van Halen. I don't think David Lee Roth would have done well in that situation.
I don't either. And they say in the movie that they were looking to get Van Halen, but they were on tour. Our buddy Greg Renoff, who was on First Concert Memories #2, talking about seeing Van Halen live in 1984. He's like, actually, that's not true. They were not on tour at that point.
Okay.
They were breaking up, and that's why. That's probably why they couldn't do it. But anyway, I mean, yeah, they got everybody, and they kept saying, let's get Hall & Oates, let's get Bette Midler. One of Ken Kragen's assistants like, I want Madonna. And Ken's like, no, I want Cyndi Lauper. I'm like, could you not get them both? I mean, did it have to be either or? They didn't really explain that part.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. And I know that at one point in time, after the awards are over and they're doing the press conference, they're asking Huey Lewis about it. It looks like Madonna's standing right next to him. So yeah, I didn't get that either. Like, why did no one know her? Did they approach her and she said no? Yeah, that was really kind of they hyped that up and then it just kind of fell off. Like, I don't know why that didn't happen. You figure out why Prince wasn't there, but not why Madonna wasn't.
Right, yeah, but they got an amazing Smokey Robinson there, the Pointer Sisters were there, all of Michael Jackson's, not all of them, but a bunch of his siblings were there. They had Sheila E. in the hopes to get Prince, Lindsey Buckingham, Dan Aykroyd for some reason. I never really understood that.
That was another thing too. Yeah, it was one of I can't remember who it was, one of the assistants or something was like, oh, we had to book Dan Aykroyd. Why?
Like, what for?
did he warm them up? Like, what was the deal?
I'm like, yeah, was he going to sing Who You Gonna Call? I mean, that's not even him. It's Ray Parker. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't get that.
And I thought that was weird too. I thought that was weird even in 1985. I was like, why is Dan Aykroyd there? He just must have been somebody's friend hanging around or something, but that didn't make any sense.
I know, but I'm going to go ahead and read the soloists.
All right.
In order here, just so everyone knows who was on here. Lionel Richie, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, James Ingram, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Dionne Warwick, Willie Nelson, Al Jarreau, Bruce Springsteen, Kenny Loggins, Steve Perry, from Journey, but not anymore, Daryl Hall, Huey Lewis, Cyndi Lauper, Kim Carnes, Bob Dylan, and Ray Charles. Wow, lots of star power there. And not to mention some of the people who played on the demo and on the final. It includes David Paich of Toto fame and Steve Porcaro, also of Toto fame, and Greg Phillinganes, who I just saw with Toto the other night, So they've got a lot of heavy hitters, Louis Johnson on the bass, who played with Michael Jackson, some of Quincy's guys, right?
Right.
Who would come in and do this right. But there's one more guy who I had no clue about, who actually deserves a lot of credit for helping put this song together. And that's a guy named Tom Baylor.
Okay, and so if we're going to talk about that to me was the most interesting part of this thing.
Wasn't it?
This guy who, what did he say? It's half a line, your sound, your style, your key.
Yep.
The fact that he could put this together and get these people who don't sing anything alike to have a cohesive thing is insane to me, because he had it all mapped out, who was going to sing well together, who was going to overshadow somebody if you put them together, point out the low spots. To me, the fact that they put it together and he got it sorted was amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, I obviously had no clue who Tom Baylor was going into this. Singer, songwriter, arranger, that kind of guy. He and Quincy had become tight in the 70s. And I guess Tom had grown up in the gospel church, and then he and his brother became singers. He worked with the Wrecking Crew on hundreds of worldwide hits. So he's a pretty big deal who you probably wouldn't know unless you were in the industry. But that's what he did. Quincy's like, look, we're going to have all these people in here. I need you to work on who's going to sing what bits and who's going to sing together and all that kind of stuff. Because in a lot of this song, you'll sing a half line, the other person will sing a half line, another will, and then the three of them sing together.
Right. And so
how do you do that?
Well, you do that because he knows how the voices work. He's listening to their, not solo stuff, but the stuff that they've done, and he knows who goes together well and what part of the song would suit them the best. And that's the other thing I didn't really realize either, is that the song, like the musical parts, like it's got to be real simple. This is for the vocalist.
Right.
This is not the musical part of it has to be very, very simple. So you're not paying attention to that, and it doesn't take away from the voices.
Well, exactly. And it's like, we're going to get Stevie Wonder and Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers to all sing together. Oh, we are? Oh, okay. Yeah. How do you do that? I don't know how you do that.
And neither did Kenny for a minute.
Well, yeah, we get Dionne Warwick and Willie Nelson and Al Jarreau to all sing together. Okay, if you say so, kind of thing.
Hey, everybody, this is Britt Lightning from Vixen, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
So, yeah, and they're like, all right, great, we're going to make all this happen. But then the question is, so he starts to put that together, which makes the song. And Quincy's like, well, we'll just put them in the booth one by one. And Tom Baylor's like, no, it'll never happen. It'll take 4 weeks to do it. We're going to put them in a circle, and they're going to sing to each other, looking at each other. And so that becomes dynamic as well. You could put anybody in booths anywhere around the world and then meld it together through the magic. But if they're actually going to sit next to each other, well, they can't be mortal enemies, right? They can't be people who can't stand each other. So yeah, there's a lot, especially with the egos that are in that room. Oh my God. So it was a lot harder to do than just the musicality of it. There's politics as well.
And the fact too, where they could not, even when they told the artist what they were going to do, they didn't say where it was going to be. That had to be a top level secret, because they didn't want anybody finding out and people freaking out when they showed up and there was a whole bunch of press there.
And descending on it. Yeah, that's right. And so when they finally got the demo together, and I thought the part where Lionel's talking about how they wrote the song was fascinating too. It's like, what kind of song is it going to be? Because I don't know how to write songs. I know how to come up with lyrics and maybe a melody in my head, but I don't know how to make it into a song. It's like, well, what kind of song is it going to be? Is it going to be a lullaby? Is it going to be a march? Dun, dun. And when he got that, it's like, okay, it's going to be this. That's what it's going to be. And then he and Michael start working on it together. And once he's got it's an anthem. And then they started putting it together. It's like, okay, now we've got the bass line of it. I'm like, that's how you wrote this song? That's unbelievable to me.
And the fact when he was talking about too, he was talking to Michael Jackson, he said, you can write the song and I can write the song, but we need something huge. He knew what he had to do right off the bat. And part about when he goes to Michael Jackson's house, here's Bubbles the monkey, hug them. I don't want to hug the monkey. I don't want to hug the monkey. I'm here to work. Stop that. And what was the other thing too? Like, it wasn't Lionel. It wasn't Lionel. Lionel.
It was Lionel.
Like, okay, yeah, and the snake and the thing. It's like, oh my God,
he heard us singing, Lionel. He wanted to come say hello. It's like, get the snake away from me, Michael. The other thing I thought was fascinating too is like, because Lionel's sitting at the piano, he's trying to work something out. He's like, Michael doesn't play. He's an extraordinary songwriter, but he can't play any instruments. So he would just sing everything and hum it.
Yeah, we were talking about the Tom Baylor part being fascinating. That was the second most fascinating part, is that he can't play anything, but he can vocalize exactly how it's supposed to go.
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything. So he's like, I have these tapes and tapes of him like humming and just doing stuff with his voice. I'm like, God, those tapes are gold. Man.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable, Lionel. That's so cool, to be honest with you. Because Michael's always been an enigma and a weirdo, but he was incredibly talented. So it's like, can we get more into that, please? Versus the Jesus juice and the chip and everything else, right?
Right. And I think that shows up too, what a professional he was also. Like, yes, he was a weirdo. He had some personal problems, but when they were doing this, it seemed like he was 100% in, and he was a company dude. And that, to me, that really came through with the Motown guys also. All those guys were pros since they were young. Right. They knew how to work the studio, and it just seemed like everybody had a bond that night. But those dudes, including Smokey Robinson, had more of a bond. Like it was like you were in their clubhouse at that point in time.
So true. Just to be a fly on the wall. It's like, but we were, because not only were they recording it all, but they were recording the video at the exact same time, which added to the pressure. Absolutely did. But back to the whole, where are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? Now, as an adult, realizing how difficult it is to schedule all this, that's when I'm like, God, yeah, when would they have done that? How could they have ever scheduled that? And it just came down to the fact that the American Music Awards were in late January, and Lionel was hosting, by the way, which is already a huge job. It's already a lot of work for him, because not only is he hosting and changing outfits a lot, has to be articulate, but he sang 2 or 3 of his songs.
Yeah.
And he won 6 awards, so he had to keep running back up there all the time. Talk about, if that was the only thing he did that night, that's like a week's worth of work in just a few hours there, man. That's unbelievable.
Well, and when you figure too, he's getting ready for this and trying to write this song at exactly the same time. And I think there's a clip of him. He's being interviewed, and he's like, "Yeah, this is the most dialogue I've ever had." So he's got to he's got to at least. I don't think you have to memorize it, but you have to be very familiar, so you're not tripping over anything. Yeah, that was a massive amount of work for one day.
I know he's got a lot of. He always had my respect, but just knowing what happened in this 24-hour period, he has my utmost respect. Yeah. I don't know who else could have done what Lionel Richie did those 2 days.
Absolutely.
So they realize, okay, a lot of them are going to be in for the American Music Awards anyway. And then those who aren't, we'll just pull them in and say, and we'll send them the tape and say, and be at this studio. Well, they blacked that out on the letters so that even the artists wouldn't know where they were going that day, because they didn't want it all getting out there. They didn't want the press leaking it. They didn't want their assistants leaking it. They had to keep it under wraps. And so it was at the A&M recording studios in Hollywood. It's big enough. It's close by. Everyone can get there after being at the Shriners Auditorium is where they held the AMAs. But while everyone else was at the AMAs, Michael Jackson and Quincy were at A&M doing some recording.
So I didn't get that part either. Did he just not care, or did he figure he wasn't going to win anything? Or because he was all in, Michael Jackson, at that point in time. So I guess
here's what the way I took it was that he'd already clobbered the Grammys and won like 8 of those the year before. He's already very shy, and he wasn't going to do this, at least be on the song. Like, he's going to help write it, but then he didn't really want to be in the video and on the song. He's like, it's overexposure.
Right.
I don't need to be in that. And then Quincy's like, no, this is very serious. It's a big deal, and you need to do it. It would be a huge mistake if you didn't. So he listened to him, and he got into it. I just think one more awards ceremony. He's like, he already clobbered the Grammys. He already had the biggest Grammys ever. He doesn't need more awards and all that kind of stuff. If he wins, great. They'll ship him to the office. So. And he didn't. He was head-to-head against Prince, and Prince won a couple. And so maybe that was part of it, too. It's like, I don't need to be in this head-to-head thing. I'm just going to be a recluse. And he's going to go here and get a head start and start laying down some of his stuff ahead of time. And his voice was unbelievable.
Oh yeah, over the top, and that was another thing too. Is I know they had recording techniques back then to make your voice sound better, not like what they do now, but it sounded like him coming straight through that microphone without anything else. It's just amazing. Like a lot of those people, like you think, well, can they really sing? Yeah, they can really sing, and it's just, I mean, I think it was one of the producer guys or the engineers that was like, wow, I've never heard a voice like that before. Just crystal clear, right on pitch. Perfect.
Unbelievable. And sometimes he's just kind of messing around and he'll throw out a few words. I'm like, oh my God, just capture those few words and lay that down. It's kind of amazing what he can do. So he's there first. I think Quincy's there obviously as well. The show goes down. Well, Lionel's a great host. He wins a bunch of awards. Mm-hmm. He performs well. And then we got to rush everybody back. And there's, more than 40 people coming in here, right? It's like, it wasn't just Huey Lewis. It was all of the news,
Yeah.
They all sang back up. And so then it's like, okay, now we're going to get all these people in here, but we got to keep their handlers, their assistants out of here. And he wrote a big sign, leave your ego at the door, which was necessary, man. You couldn't pull any power chips on this because once you do it, then the other people are going to start doing it and it's going to get out of control. You know? So,
and then they just did not have the time for any of that. It had to be as quick as possible, as well as possible without anybody having any other ideas.
Yeah, no, I mean, they had to do it that night until 7 or 8 in the morning, whatever it was. Yeah. I mean, it was this night. That's it. You don't get any more. Period. End of story, So they made it happen. So they get in there and they do the chorus and they've got everybody. They've got these 50 or so people in there all singing together. Yes, some people are little troublemakers or whatever. But they recorded it. It's like, no octaves. Let's just do it in your key. And if it's not in your key, hey, just hang back. Don't sing. We've got enough people. Your voice won't be missed. If we only have 34 people singing this part, it doesn't matter. Bob Dylan doesn't sing any of it because none of it's in his range and he cannot sing.
He looks, at that point in time, they had a couple of close-up shots of him in the crowd. He looks very confused, very uncomfortable, just doesn't know what's going on here, doesn't know what to do. And they were talking about how, like, if you like you said, they don't want any harmonies. We're doing this in one key. And if you can't, if that's not your key, just take it. Just take a step
quiet.
back. What do they say? Suck along quietly. Nobody will notice that you're not singing.
So he did the whole time, basically. Yeah, but then there's some people who are trying to have fun, and there's some people who are, it's hot in there because they've got all these lights so they can film the thing.
Right.
So there's a bunch of bodies in there. There's a bunch of technology in there. It's getting hot pretty quickly. And some people don't need this, And so, but it's going pretty well. It takes a while to get all this down. And then at some point, Stevie Wonder, who they couldn't get in touch with to do the song, he shows up at the beginning. He's like, okay, you want to write this song? I'm like, no, we've written it, Stevie. We just need you to sing on it.
That was 3 weeks ago, Stevie.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that's fine. They get into it. They start doing it. And I also thought was cool was Quincy brought Bob Geldof in before they got started singing to give him kind of an idea of this is why you're doing this, and he kind of told the stories of these people dying and the aid that's needed and all that kind of stuff. So kind of put him in the right frame of mind. It's like, okay, yeah, we just had a big party. Some of us won awards. I think Cyndi Lauper won an award. And so okay, fine, we'll listen. And they're like, okay, now our minds are set and we're going to get to work. And I think Quincy did the right thing there. I think it kind of brought a focus that it probably lacked when everyone showed up. Hey, how you doing? Oh, great to see you.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, it wasn't the party great. Yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, there are people that are literally dying. What do you say? It was like some very small amount of grain or whatever for 27,000 people. Or it's just you could see the look on people's faces when they were like, yeah, this is a real deal. But there was a clip from Tom Brokaw or something saying this is happening, but for people in America, it's so far away, it doesn't really register with them. And I think you're right. The Bob Geldof speech got everybody in the right frame of mind.
Exactly. And then at 10:30, they kind of start singing. And then they sing for a few hours. Now it gets to be like 1:32 in the morning. And then Stevie Wonder comes with, I think the song needs a little bit of Swahili on it. And then he starts singing these Swahili parts. Everyone's like, You can hear Cyndi Lauper, what does that mean? You know, and it's like, it's a little Monday morning quarterbacking here. Like, you can tell Lionel's like, oh God, because he's the one who had to go around to every little group and like put out fires. Like, you're not going to do that. You're going to do this. He's the one backstage at the AMAs,
right,
who had to convince Cyndi Lauper, who said, well, my boyfriend heard the track and he doesn't think it's a hit, so I shouldn't do it. It's like, Cyndi,
do the right thing. Up.
Yeah, it's do the right thing right now.
Be there
Come
tonight.
and do this.
And that came through to me loud and clear when he was running the whole, like, Quincy was in charge. Michael was kind of like the I don't want to say he was the ranger, but he was going back and forth. You know, he was looking at the notes, but Lionel was the dude on the floor who was making sure that everything was flowing the right way. If anything started to flare up, he would, oh, hey, you know, everybody good here. You know, don't get.
Why don't you try this? He said, the one thing you can't ask is, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because then you'll get 40 opinions. Like, no, you say, look, this is it.
Correct.
This is what we're doing. Do it like this.
Yeah.
So he was working after he just busted his ass on the American Music Awards. Now he's working overtime on this. And then Stevie comes up, I think we need to include a little Swahili in this song. Whatever, dude. And then Waylon Jennings, who was there, was just like, well, I never met a good old boy who sang no Swahili, and he walked. And he left, and that was it.
And they had footage of him like, no one said anything. No one really. He just got up, walked off, and then what did Lionel say? And then we lost Waylon.
Yeah, and then eventually Bob Geldof came and said, look, you're not singing to the people who need help. You're singing to the people who can give help. You're singing to people in America and England and places like that. So it's just drop it, Stevie. So finally he did.
Well, didn't somebody bring up the fact that they don't actually speak Swahili in Ethiopia?
Where the need was. It's like, well, we could do it in whatever. I'm like, Stevie, stop. Okay. We love you. Just sing it the way, you know, we're asking you to here. And so that was a bump that you had to get through, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when he's talking about there's troublemakers, like, yeah, you know, that you got to kind of get past that and push forward. But they managed to. It's kind of amazing that they did.
You know, and the other thing too was that so you had that, and then you had Michael Jackson with the let's do the la sha la la la, and then Smokey Robinson, who's that's stupid. Don't do that. That's terrible. And you know, he's got the biggest album on the face of the earth, but Smokey's like, that's how we do each other at Motown. Like it's
right.
You love him, but you call him out on his crap. That's dumb. Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And he's also like, that's what we're given. What are we giving?
Yeah.
We're not giving it. Let's change it to let's start giving.
Yeah.
Ah, there you go. So it's like, you know, I hate to tell Michael he's wrong, but it's like, look, I've known him since he's a little kid. Okay. And I'm going to
call him on
his
crap.
And it worked. And he was right. So that worked. Pretty impressive that all this came off. It's like, okay, now that part's, we've got all the chorus parts, we've got all that done. Now we've got to get into the solo bits. And I feel like that's when a lot of the real work started. Like you can dismiss a lot of people.
Right.
Michael's brothers and sisters don't need to be there anymore.
Okay, the news, you guys can go.
The news is you can go home, right? You know, just bet we don't need you anymore, dear. Just send everybody off. But there's still this huge amount of star power in as far as who is going to sing the solos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that they had Lionel kind of started off because he's like the calming effect, solid voice, coming with Stevie, very famous voice. And then when you hit Paul Simon and Kenny Rogers, now you're going through not only more generations, but more genres of music too. Kind of showing, hey, we're all in this together. That was pretty cool, if you ask me.
Yeah, and going back to Lionel, he wrote the song. He put this whole thing together, and even he was like, I can't believe they want me to sing this. And what do you think? You would think somebody like that was like, of course I'm singing this. This is my song. So very humble. And then I love that part where Kenny can't get there to the note, and you hear Paul Simon saying, what can I do? Can I help you? Can we do this a little bit different? Instead of being like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, get him out of here. Just everybody's like, we got to get this done. And nobody wants to, I don't think at that point in time, anybody wanted to show anybody up. They just wanted to do it the best way possible.
Exactly. That's right. And it's getting late. So let's just try to work together here. Now, Sheila E. was there for the chorus. She was invited because she can sing, but she was kind of really invited, it seems, to coax Prince into coming.
That's what she said, and she got that the light kind of went on. I mean, I think she kind of always knew that, but then it was like, yeah, you're just keeping me here in the hopes that he'll show up, and yeah, he's not, so we'll see ya.
Yeah, because they really wanted him. He's a huge star. He had a good night at the AMAs, obviously, but he's also a recluse. He doesn't like big crowds, and they kept asking her, hey, you think he'll show up? And she did call him, I think, at one point to say, this is actually really cool if you want to come down. But she realized, I know Prince, he's not going to be in this huge crowd of people. That's not his thing. So and they kept asking her, well, you think he'll show? What do you think? She's like, you know what? I'm going to split because this isn't about me. It's about trying to get Prince here. Now he did, I guess, donate a track for the Tears in Your Eyes to the We Are the World album, but he didn't appear on this song. No biggie, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think it did just fine without him. The interesting part to me is that Prince and Michael Jackson were exactly the same age. They were both born in 58. But the difference between the two of them was very apparent then, because I think he said, oh, I'll show up, but I want to play a guitar solo. And it's like, we don't want that. We don't need that. It's not, he did not want to sing. And the fact that it had to be kind of all about him, where it seemed like that night Jackson was like, whatever needs to happen, I'm there for you.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't want to record with other people. He kind of wants to do his own thing.
Right.
That's just who he is. Plus, he's very shy. He didn't want all those people talking to him. But like Chris Rock said, you know how you used to debate who's better, Michael Jackson or Prince? Prince won. But that's just because he wasn't seducing 10-year-old boys. That's why he won.
Yeah.
For the most part. Anyway, we're not getting into that.
No.
Because Michael Jackson did an amazing job in this song, and we want to...
That's what we're focusing on here today.
Prop him up here. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, but Kenny was having a hard time hitting that note. Paul Simon works with him, and then they landed. Okay, great. Then they go through James Ingram, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Michael Jackson. That's all good. Diana Ross, Dionne Warwick, Willie come in and do their thing. And then there's Al Jarreau. And Al's having a hard time hitting it because apparently Al wanted to party and celebrate before the work was done. I thought that was funny. I did.
It's hilarious because you can tell there's something, he's off. You can tell it, like he's not really getting what he's supposed to be doing. He's singing the words, but the phrasing is off, and you can tell everyone's like, "Oh my god!" And then they go into, he'd kind of been drinking all night, and we needed to get this done before he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, it's like every hour. So, hey man, send in some wine, send in some champagne, And then Lionel will be like, I would go and grab it and take it the hell out of there because we don't need that. We've got work to do. So that one was apparently difficult to get done. Bruce Springsteen's, I guess, I don't know if it was difficult. He just kind of went late in the order there. He's just hanging around for a long time.
Well, and the thing was, too, he had just finished up a show, and I guess that part of the tour in Buffalo the night before, and his whole thing was like he didn't fly after a show. I guess the way that he sings, I think Kenny Loggins said it sounds like he's got broken glass in his mouth. And so I think he was having a hard time, but he was gonna soldier through it. But he really probably, in his own admission, should not have been singing that night.
Yeah, but he does come off pretty well in the documentary. Like when they asked me, I said, well, that's a good cause.
Yeah.
You always say that's horrible, but what can I do? Well, here's your chance to do something. So yeah, okay, sure, sign me up. And to his credit, he did it.
Yeah, and it seemed like when he was doing his part, it was kind of like, was that good? Do you want me to do it again? Did I land that? It wasn't like, let's get this done, hurry up. So I think, once he got there, he was ready to work like everybody else.
And he did it. His part is iconic, and he landed it. It did well. Kenny Loggins did that smooth. Steve Perry belted it out. He just stepped up and did it, man.
We just talked about you seeing Journey, in the Journey songs. He kills it. I mean, but that's the Baylor part again. You had to put Steve Perry with Daryl Hall because their voices are very powerful. You can't. I mean, who else is going to follow him up? What, me? Exactly. If you can barely sing? No, there's just no way.
No, I was just so impressed. Like he stepped up and belted. I'm like, whoa!
Like it was nothing. Like he was just like, man, whatever.
I mean, he did it. I'm like, God, Daryl Hall, you have an amazing voice. I wouldn't want to sing after Steve Perry on that track. Seriously, I wouldn't. Yeah, he did it, and he did great, you know? And then, okay, so they kind of were holding one for Prince.
Right.
But because he didn't show up, like, hey, let's have Huey Lewis do it. So they basically said, Huey, we want you in the news to come down and sing the chorus on this. Okay, great. I don't know Michael or Lionel. This is an amazing invitation. Thank you. And it's like, okay, now you're going to take Prince's part. It's like, what?
Wait, what now? What?
And by the way, you're going to have to be here another 4 or 5 hours. And you could tell that he was struggling a little bit with it too.
Mm-hmm.
He was joking about it at the time and in the documentary here, but you could tell he's having a hard time reaching the right note.
Yeah, and part of the problem too is that he was singing with 2 women who can sing naturally higher, and so he's trying, like they were saying, like, I guess Cindy was just kind of holding it, but it wasn't a problem for her, but Huey was holding on for dear life trying to get up that high.
Yeah, now Kim Carnes has more of a throaty, deeper voice than your average female singer, I feel like, but still, I mean, he's, but when they all sang together and he found the harmony part that worked for him, again, it came off incredible.
But I like the part about how, like, when somebody, because they were doing it in order, right? And so when somebody would mess up, they would stop and start again. And Huey's like, hey, can we just run through the whole thing? Because I've never done this before, and I'd really kind of like a couple of swings at it before we lay it down.
Yeah. And Michael's like, hey, that's a good idea. He's like, thanks. Thanks. It is a good idea. Yeah. All right. So they get that done. But now it's time for Bob Dylan, who's basically not sung all night.
Right.
And has an odd voice anyway. And he could not find it. He couldn't figure out what to do.
He looked like he'd had a stroke, because it was like you could, there's a choice. What? Bob, what are you doing? What is happening here? He didn't know. He was just confused. He didn't know what was happening or what he was supposed to be doing.
I know. And although in 84, 85, Bob is very old news at this point, Now, he's making albums. He continued to make albums and tour a little bit. He made an album around that time, Infidels, which I think is very, very good. And Mark Knopfler's on it, and our boy Mick Taylor's on it. Of course, he can get whoever he wants to play with him, but it was somewhere around that time. He was still doing good work, but it was just in the age of techno and new wave at MTV. He just didn't fit in. And so now they have all these extraordinary singers, and yes, he's a big name, and he's done a lot of cause work with his music over the years, but is this going to work? And it wasn't until he's like, Stevie, come and play this. And help me out with this.
He asks him, hey, Stevie, can you play this? And that's when you see what an absolute beast Stevie Wonder is. Because he does it. Not only does he play the part, he sings like Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And
he's
shows him
He's
exactly.
a minor bird, man.
Yes.
He could do anybody's voice. That's just how he is, So when he did it in Bob's voice, Bob started to catch on. And then he laid it down, and Quincy's like, yeah, that was good. He goes, you're lying. That wasn't any good. And he's like, all right, well, you would know. I mean, it's fine. If you say it's good, it's good. Yeah, I'm good then. Plus, I don't know if he was staying up that late. I mean, it's like 6, 7 in the morning now. I mean, most musicians are used to staying up late, but...
This is Mel Gannon from Simple Minds. You listen to the Ugly American Werewolf in London. You stay cool and see you soon.
They put it all together, and then, they all kind of went on their separate ways. But just imagine December 23rd, Harry Belafonte talks to Ken Kragen, I think we should do this. And then on January 28th and 29th, because it went into the morning, they lay it down. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
That they could put it together, the songwriting, the arrangement, everything like that, getting everybody together, getting them to that studio, and then to lay it down in that one night. Back to the beginning of the discussion about how the documentary is, can you make it interesting? Can you make this thing interesting? This was fascinating to watch this, how it came together.
It really was. I had to watch it like 3 times. I had my daughter watch it a couple of times with him. Like, honey, this will never happen again. This is extraordinary. And look at the talent in that room. It's unbelievable. And then I think at the end it said it went on to give $80 million at the time. To aid, and it was like, which is $160 million in today's money or something like that. But it continues to. I mean, anytime it sells, anytime it's played, that money goes towards famine aid. Now, the thing that I had forgotten about was that they kind of coordinated playing it at the same time on radio stations all around the world.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. But I remember the hype up to it that they were going to do this, and it was insane because it's in English, but yet the way they wrote the song and the way that the chorus flows, you can kind of get it in any language.
Well, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And it sold incredibly well. I mean, it went to number one in America. Its first initial print of like 800,000 copies sold out within 3 days of release. And that's just the single, you know. So it became the fastest selling pop single in American history. Crazy, you know. And then, of course, there was an album that came out. Like I said, Prince put a song on there. Other people put songs on there. It was the first single to be certified multi-platinum. It's 4 times platinum, which is 4 million copies. And they said the estimated global sales of just the single are 20 million worldwide. So that's kind of unbelievable. Now, and then it won a Grammy like the next year or whatever. So Michael and Lionel won a Grammy for it because they wrote it, you know. But I mean, it did well, People's Choice. It won an MTV award. Mm-hmm. It was, you know, it was a big deal. I didn't know the B-side was Grace, which was a Quincy Jones song, but it shouldn't surprise you. And it was a sensation. Being, what were we then, 11, 12 years old. It did open our eyes up to, like, this is what music can do. Not that the British single, the Do They Know It's Christmas, didn't. But I just felt like this had a bigger impact in America.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it wasn't just a Christmas song either. So it was on for months and months at a time. And it seemed like, yeah, everybody's getting in on this now. Like we can't be overshadowed by anybody else. We need to do our part here in America.
Yeah, and it's funny because when Lionel opened the AMAs, he said, nothing will be the same after tonight. Mm-hmm. I think people in the audience were thinking he's talking about after this show. And really it was what happened after that show at A&M Studios is what he was really talking about. They said, look, every time there's a commercial break, he was running back talking about getting over to A&M, who's coming, what are we going to do? Meanwhile, he's got to change his clothes and stuff like that. And it's like Ken Kragen. Yeah, he's sitting in the front row, and then they go to commercial. He runs backstage because he's got to work it out too. So it does show that people can really come together to do good. You talk about these people being rich and pampered and getting whatever they want. And for the most part, that's true. And I think today it's worse. Trying to get 45 stars today would be almost impossible.
No, they wouldn't do it. They would do it, but it would be like, oh yeah, I'll just record something in my house and
I'll send it to you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It will never be like that again. And the cool part was when they had the break, and I think it was Diana Ross went over to Daryl Hall and said, oh, can I have your autograph? And they're like, can I have your autograph? Like, what? And then everybody was getting everything signed by everybody else. So everybody was a fan of the people in there also.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was a cool part too.
Yeah.
It was Diana Ross went to Daryl Hall. Like, I'm a big fan. Yeah. Like, Diana Ross, a fan of Daryl Hall? What? And then everyone's a fan of everybody. So then they're all signing it. If any of those went on auction one day,
my goodness,
be quite a little item to have.
Yeah, the original music with whoever's signature on there. Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah. And so the album went on to be triple platinum in America. I remember my buddy Pat and we were pretty into music at the time, and he was saying, you know what, I'll probably just buy that album and never listen to it, you know, just because it's for a good cause. Mm-hmm. And I seem to remember it was a little more expensive than the average cassette was.
Okay.
Like if you go to Target, the average cassette was $7.99. If it had been hot, now it's not as hot, it was $6.99. If it was top 5, maybe it was $5.99. But that was always like $9.99.
Huh. Okay.
Or $8.99. Like they didn't discount that. But like, you know, this is for a good cause. It's charity. We don't discount charity. Right? You know, it's like buy it and pay full price no matter what. And so like I get that. But I mean, just on the album, Steve Perry did a single, Pointer Sisters did a single, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band did a live Jimmy Cliff song on there. Northern Lights, I don't really know, but I know that Jim Valance and David Foster wrote the song.
Right.
We mentioned Prince. Chicago did a song. Tina Turner did a song. Kenny Rogers. And Huey Lewis and the News did one as well. So that's pretty cool that they all got in there. Yes, the engineer was Umberto Gatica, and he had a nice role in the documentary there, talking about how it all came together. But Tom Baylor was associate producer on the song, and despite all the amazing songs he's worked on, he considers that one of the apexes of his extraordinary career.
Oh, and rightly so. rightly so. The fact that he pulled that together was amazing. And I love that dude. Who was the camera guy? I think his name was Ken Wu, talking about, and he's like, at the end, I've got this invoice that I made up. And they're like, you're not getting paid for this. Put that away. Well, I got a t-shirt and a cool story.
Yeah, that's right. And he's like, yeah, we're bumping into stuff, and like we're trying to stay out of the camera guy's ways, trying to stay out of the musician guy's ways.
And that's the thing too. Like he was talking about cameraman. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. And then you see the wide shot. It's not a little baby camera that it's that giant thing on your shoulder, and you're trying to crouch down on the floor and get this shot and not mess with anybody. And there's wires and light. Oh my God, how they got that done, I don't know.
You know what else would be amazing if you had the tape? Because what they did is I think it was Quincy wrote down, it's like, okay, Cyndi Lauper, put it on like duct tape or whatever, slapped it on the floor.
Yeah.
You're standing here. Michael Jackson here. If you just had those pieces of tape. Bruce Springsteen, Willie Nelson, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers. I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
So, look, it's not I was one of the people who didn't buy it just because I knew
you're a jerk.
I was never going to listen to it, to be honest with you. No, I did not help. I am a jerk. You're right. I didn't buy Do They Know It's Christmas either. I didn't buy either one of them. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah.
That must be why you don't like Mondays, Bob, because on Mondays, I will not buy either of those singles or albums. But I know you're all doing great work. So, and at the end of the day, it was such a huge moment in pop culture in our lives that when I saw the documentary, I'm like, we got to do a quick show on this. This is something extraordinary and something you'll never see again. And it's just unbelievable that they pulled it off, especially in the time frame.
Right.
So I can't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I was familiar with the song, obviously the time, but I had no idea about the story about how it went together. And I like the part at the end where Lionel says he gets home right at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and his family's all like, oh, you did such a great job on the award show. Oh yeah, that happened too, huh? Okay, yeah.
Like I was already out of his mind.
Exactly.
I mean, the 6 wins probably weren't out of his mind because that's
in the back of the
cool.
car,
yeah, exactly. And that's only going to help propel his career. But yes, he's getting ready for his first big solo tour. That was what's happening next for Lionel. Like he didn't have enough going on to add this in there. My hat's off to you, Lionel Richie. You are a man among men.
Yeah. And yeah, just the coolness, the professionalism that he showed that night, and just throughout the whole explanation of it too, like just very humble, like this was just something that he did. I mean, it's a song that reached billions of people, and yet he's just like, yeah, man, I was just part of the deal. Belafonte wanted to do it, I stepped up, and that was it.
It was fun to watch the documentary on the greatest night in pop. It really was. Because Jackson and I grew up in the 80s. That was a huge time in our lives as far as getting to know artists, getting to know music and rock music and what we like, watching MTV basically every day or every chance that we got. And we knew all of those artists on that song. And the fact that they had Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, the two biggest solo acts of the time, doing it together was a huge deal. Do They Know It's Christmas was a big hit, and so we knew the American response, if you will, was going to be huge. And just to see how they pulled it all off, I just thought it was very, very well done. I thought it was something that we would love to talk about, and it was. And hopefully a lot of you out there can relate to it. I think certainly the American audience can, but I think most people of our generation would remember the single and remember the time when artists tried to get together to do something to help. And if you haven't seen it, or if you don't have Netflix, I guess you can't borrow people's accounts anymore. They've cracked down on that. But just go sit with a friend and watch it on their Netflix account, because it's a great story and it was all for a great cause. And we want to know, folks, do we get something right? Do we get something wrong? Do we miss the point? Do we leave out your favorite part? You email us and let us know. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. Let us know the bands, the albums, the books, the concerts, the DVDs, the charity singles that you want to hear us talk about here on the show. Make sure you go out and download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Those downloads are the lifeblood of our show. And if you're thinking about it, hey, go out and give us a 5-star review. It just helps us grow the show, helps us find more rock and rollers like you. Thanks as always to Pantheon Podcast for making us part of the family. And thanks to RareVinyl.com, our amazing sponsor, where if you go use the code UGLY, you can save yourself 10% off one entire order. That's it for this week. We still have some magic up our sleeves for the rest of the year, some fun discussions and fun guests, so stay tuned. And to all you rockers all around the world, be cool. and keep doing what you do to keep rock alive.